Good morning to all of you around the world. My name is Aaron Hunt. I am a partner here at Stace Hammond and I head up the Migration Partners team. We're going to do, today's date, let's start with that, is the 7th of August. It's a Friday. It's 9 AM in the morning. It is a Friday, so I am wearing a bit more casual wear today, so no tie. We are going to do, we've had a request to do a video about student visas, so unfortunately there's not a lot of good news, very little actually, but I thought it might be a good chance to bring together all the little bits of student visa news we've sort of done through the other videos into one video. As always, this is not legal advice, this is sort of our view on the changes that are happening in immigration. In New Zealand, if you want to get legal advice from us, we need to know more information about your situation, and you need to be a client of ours. So you sort of come to us, provide us information, and we can work with you on the best approach, or sort of giving you some ideas about answers or pathways to be able to come to New Zealand or stay here if you're already here. Now we are, and quickly a side note, we are still waiting for the temporary work visa information, despite that it is already the law. So already right now if you apply for a temporary work visa, you'll be applying for the new temporary work visa, not the essential skills or work to residence visas. However, the website does not also allow these applications. They haven't done the website yet. So while it's the law since July 27th, a couple of weeks ago, you cannot apply for these visas yet. It's a bit of a mess. The immigration website is due to go down this weekend for an extended time and some major changes, so we're expecting that's going to be one of the big changes they make, and we'll hopefully finally be given the exact rules about how these temporary work visas are going to work. You know, we've provided you with the sort of the larger picture and the small changes here and there, but the fine details we haven't got yet. So when we've got those through, probably on Monday we'll put a new video out sort of covering what those sort of fine details are and how the process has changed. Now we're also looking over the weekend, we think we're going to have changes made in regards to the exemption process, so asking for those border exceptions and the right to enter New Zealand. We got an email last week that on the 10th of August, which is Monday coming up, they are putting to place this new process. The major one, apart from hoping that we have a bit more definition around some of the areas, the major one will be is that there will now be a charge to apply for that exemption. We do know a lot of people have been trying to get exemptions and doing multiple sort of applications for exemptions. They're going to start charging for that process. It's $3.80 for employers and $45 for individuals. And of course in most situations it's the employer who applies for the exemption, not the individual, the applicant, because that's immigration's focus on employers at the moment rather than individuals under the current sort of COVID economic crisis. We also have a session with Immigration New Zealand next week about exceptions and more detail about them. So we'll do a video after that as well. I think that's on Thursday morning. We'll do a video after that to hopefully be able to provide more clarity around that exemption process, and if there's any sort of we have a number of clients who've asked about sort of strange situations and how they're going to fit in. So hopefully that will provide a bit more information, and we'll give that to you. But today's about student visas, and I said there's not much good news, but at least we'll hopefully give you some clarity and let you sort of make some plans going forward. Now, for those already in New Zealand, that's great. Things are as normal. The usual process. You get your place of study, or you continue place of study. You make the application. You get the visa. Nothing has changed. Just don't leave the country. Don't go for a short trip to Australia or a short trip home, because you will be stuck over there. While you're here, stay here. People are very jealous of the fact that you are here, so definitely, don't risk that opportunity by leaving the country. Head to Queenstown. Everybody else, as it seems, apart from me. Now we'll touch on quarantine quickly, because this is going to impact the other student visa applicants. Now the government had originally estimated there'd only be a small number of New Zealand citizens returning during COVID. I think the government sort of thought that we would take an approach the rest of the world took, and we would either be as bad as them or they would be as good as us. Of course now we're seeing that New Zealand is the shining star when it comes to handling of this crisis, and that we are being swamped by residents and citizens who are coming back to New Zealand. The current facilities in quarantine, and they have been added on to, I think there's about 28 hotels nationwide now in as facilities, and there's getting more added every week. they're currently allowing over 3,000 people a week to enter. It's a 2-week quarantine process, so 6,000 plus every 2 weeks are coming into New Zealand. Now, 95% of those are residents and citizens. And so there's very few coming through on the exceptions of those working on, say, the Avatar films or the Lord of the Rings or the America's Cup, or going to Antarctica, where there's a launching base for Antarctic missions. They get an exception to come in, but the vast majority is residents and citizens, and they're the ones who are creating this backlog. I've spoken to a good friend of mine in Dubai, and he's a Kiwi across there, and he has friends of his across there, also Kiwis, who've been trying to get back to New Zealand since March. They had flights being cancelled, and now they're being told basically we have no quarantine space for you until October. So they're looking at going from March to October. It's 7-month wait to try and get back into the country. So the New Zealand government's focus is on those resident citizens first before it starts going into other areas. So only when those sort of numbers and that quarantine numbers and demands from residents and citizens goes down will they start letting in students. So for those of you who are outside New Zealand and you already had a student visa, our heart really goes out to you. So I've seen a number of people who contacted us saying, "Hey, Aaron, I've got a visa. I was coming in, tickets were booked, and then the border there closed, or the border here closed, and they were stuck." Especially those who've already prepaid for accommodation and prepaid for education. We really do feel for you. Unfortunately, the border still remains closed to you, and until that backlog and that quarantine for Kiwis coming back has gone, it's going to stay that way. Now, most likely your visa has already expired. Now, immigration has been asked about what they're going to do about that. They haven't responded yet. It has been raised with them, and they've raised it with us and sort of publicly in meetings with larger groups. We don't believe they will extend those visas because those visas are often tied to an offer of education. So that offer of education will have expired, or it's only for 6 months or a year. There's no point in extending the visa because that education period has gone. What they may do, and we've seen them do in the past with provisos, is that they may allow you to apply for another visa without cost. Now, in the past when they've done that, they've done it because they've been able to point out a possible issue at immigration or how they were handling things. And, in this case, it wasn't an immigration issue, it was a border issue, which is government, not Immigration New Zealand. So they may not offer that either. It's probably going to be, the smallest part of the cost when you add on the cost of education and somewhere to stay. But we would hope that they sort of show a bit of compassion to the foreign students and say, well, we can at least do that. We'll offer you a free application if you couldn't use your last visa. So that's what we're assuming they may do. But as I said, the border closures is out of immigration's hands. It's a central government thing. So they may say, look, it wasn't us. And that's what the response we may get. But we'll wait and see. So you need to apply for a new visa when you are able. Those who didn't have visas already, same situation. You need to apply for a visa to come here as a student when you are able. Now, the question is, of course, when is that going to be? On 31st of July, so just about a week ago, we received confirmation from immigration that there'd be no processing of offshore applications for 3 months. Now, that was student visas, visitor visas, partnership visas with small exceptions. So that basically means that 1st of November will be the minimum, the first date that new applications may be processed. That will depend on the status of the border and how our quarantine is going. So if we're still seeing only residents and citizens coming in and the border still being closed, then that might be pushed out further. Because as I said before, under law, immigration cannot grant a visa that cannot be used. So if the border's still closed, they can't say, yep, we'll process your student visa, here's your visa, but you can't come in. They would have broken the law by doing so. So they need to wait until that border has opened enough to let that visa person come in. But when we do start seeing that border reopening, we'd expect student visas to be one of the sort of the top ones we get. The student industry here is a big industry. We love having students here, and they say they often move on to becoming great migrants and great citizens. So it's important to the country to get that moving again, and that's going to be one of those big talking points coming up in a lot of the media currently here in New Zealand. Of course, those going through managed isolation or quarantine, but they call it managed isolation as the official term, will have to start paying for it. We'll have to start sort of paying for it. The new process. Actually, just a few minutes ago, about 8 minutes ago, we got an email through from Immigration New Zealand, and it's about a new website run by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. This is this is at the larger body which Immigration New Zealand is part of, but it's not Immigration New Zealand who are running this website or the process. I will put the link for this website into the description for this video. Now, you'll need to have once they open the border and they get visas going again, you'll need to have booked a place in quarantine or managed isolation before you come to New Zealand. So basically, when you're going for your student visa, you'll get a placement offer from your your education provider. You'll then apply for your visa. When that's been granted, you will then book your quarantine and your plane tickets, as you'll need to have that quarantine arranged before you can fly. I'm assuming that it's not detailed here, but I'm assuming the process is going to be when you check in, as always, they check your visa, but they'll also check for confirmation that you have quarantine booked. So you don't arrive in the country with nowhere to go. They have proposed some charges. These are proposed, so they may change. There was some discussions as to actually them being too low. Others have said no, that they're about right. They are sort of subsidised partly by the New Zealand government. The actual cost of doing quarantine is much higher than this, probably double this. But they're trying to look for a figure which they think is sort of fair and doable for most people. Now it's 3,100, so it's 3,100 New Zealand dollars for the first person in the room. After that, it's another 950 New Zealand dollars for each additional adult, and 475 for every child between 3 and 17. Under 3 is free. Now that's to cover the entire 2 weeks. So $3,100 for 2 weeks. It's what, $230 a day. It's actually quite reasonable. The places that they're looking at staying, they range from sort of 3.5, 4 star up to 5 star, pretty luxurious places. There's a number of nice places. In this, where you get placed is luck of the draw. I have heard that if you are an individual, you're more likely to get the nicer places than a family who would get put into a hotel aimed more at families rather than the luxury for the business traveller. And you will receive an invoice after your stay. So this isn't a payment in advance. You'll need to pay after your stay. You'll get an invoice and you'll have 3 months to pay that. Of course, this is all proposed. It may change, but I can't see it changing unless we have a change in government. And that's actually a good point to mention. We have an election here in about 5 or 6 weeks, and of course, COVID-19 and the handling of it is a big factor. We had our previous Prime Minister, Sir John Key, who was Prime Minister for about 9 years, speaking in Auckland the last few days, and he was saying that we need to get students back. International students are a big industry. Especially in Auckland, where I live, there's a massive industry, and the city is just filled with people from overseas, which is just fantastic. It adds to the culture and the food and everything else. But we need them because they come in, as well as providing student fees. They also then go on to work, and they also often provide so much to the country. So he's pushing for them to come in, but of course before they come in, we need the Kiwis back first. That's going to be the government's first priority. Now, I'm going to check my notes here. There are some exceptions as to who won't have to pay. So it's payable by all non-residents and non-citizens, but there are some exceptions. So partners of New Zealand citizens or residents who are travelling with them don't have to pay the cost. Anyone travelling to New Zealand to attend the sentencing of the Christchurch mosque attack murderer, plus a few others. There are a few other exceptions. Now, residents and citizens will have to pay if they're coming to New Zealand for less than 90 days, or if they left after the rules came into effect and they want to return. So Kiwis can't sort of leave the country, then come back and just go, hey, I want my 2 weeks of free accommodation in one of these nice hotels. They will be paying for it. As will those coming back to New Zealand for a short trip. The intention is basically coming back to New Zealand to live and you're a Kiwi, there's no cost, otherwise you're paying. And that is it for today. I was hoping to give you a bit more good news for students. We will come back to you when we have more information next week about the exemptions and about the changes being made on the website over the weekend, which should be quite substantial. Until then, kia kaha, keep your face masks on, and we will see you all soon here, soon enough. Have a great day.